Friends, I welcome you to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It is not difficult for you, but it is pleasant for me. And we're starting. I suppose many people would write it off as a good old midlife crisis. Or maybe, after all these years, they would say it's a 7-year itch, a little late after 14 years of marriage. In any case, the truth is that at the age of 38, these annoying questions began to come to the fore for me. Having lived the last 16 years of my life with my wife Christina, Tina for Minnie, the mother of our 3 kids, and the baby for me, I began to think about what all this means and what could have been. Well, that's actually a lie. Maybe somewhere in the back of my mind, where we're all afraid to step most of the time, I've always asked myself the question, what if? Remember how it was when we were teenagers? How did you first find the girl of your dreams and start thinking about how your life will turn out? For some, it was a quiet life in a small house in the village. For others, it was to become a big man in a big house with a high fence around, get rich, and lead a Riley life, a carefree, comfortable, and very pleasant lifestyle. An American radio sitcom of the 1940s. I can't say exactly what happened to the dreams I had in my youth. I've always had a good job, although lately I couldn't figure out why they put up with me. Maybe, after all these years, I'm pretty tired of her. I decided that I had reached the peak of what I could reach with my employer. A couple of times I thought that maybe a change of employer would give a boost again, but that would mean moving to another part of the country, and it was necessary to take into account the children's studies and all the other upheavals in family life that the move could cause. No, the job change and everything related to it were not affordable. Well, not at that moment most likely. It would have led to an abrupt end to what was left of my marriage anyway. Yes, of course, I have to admit that life at home was not what it should have been. I know it wasn't easy for Tina sometimes, with these 3 little brats and a house that needed to be looked after. Well, yes, she found time for charity, was on the board of governors of the children's school, and before that she was a member of the parent committee. Okay, and I admit that I haven't always been as supportive of household chores as I could have been. But then I worked hard, earning money to pay for the mortgage, feed and clothe little babies. And he gave Tina almost everything a woman could ever want in life. I always thought that was my part of the deal. Tina usually did charity work 2 nights a week, and I stayed at home looking after the kids. On Mondays and Thursdays, I used to go to the band club to practice snooker on a full-size billiard table for competitions. I have a 3/4 table hidden in my garage. I'm not that bad at baize, cloth used on billiard tables, but I'm not up to professional standards, so you won't see me in the crucible. But over the years, I've won a lot of shillings in amateur competitions. Before the kids came, Tina came to watch me play in competitions. Hey, she's no slouch with a snooker cue herself. Well, she was when she had time to practice with me. If you have the idea that things have cooled down a little in our relationship, you are not much mistaken. I had a feeling that, like many other married couples, by that time we were just moving through life. Yes, we went out together, just Tina and me, a couple of times a month. But most of the time, our social life together revolved around children and their needs. I thought Tina and I were just killing time until the kids were old enough to fly away, and then, perhaps, our paths will part. In any case, I hope these revelations will give you some idea of my state of mind on that bright sunny summer morning when I was sitting in my office, shuffling papers and dreaming of being anywhere but here. Quite unexpectedly, there was a sharp knock on my office door. Unexpectedly, because Betty, she was acting as my secretary, usually called me on the intercom if I had a visitor. And if she wanted to see me, I usually went out to her because she wasn't exclusively my secretary and looked after all the other guys in the department. And yes, most of my colleagues had already realized by that time that I was not the most sociable person in the morning. So if they had any problems that they preferred to contact me rather than the head of the department, then they knew that it was better to leave them until lunch. Anyway, there was a sudden knock on my door. Then it swung open and Martin Goldman walked into the room as if he owned the place. Which, to be honest, it was. So I couldn't tell him to go to hell, could I? Old man Goldman, whose father founded the company back in the distant days, immediately after World War II, seemed to grow up in this organization and led it with an iron hand for many years. Anyway, the old bastard had died about 8 months earlier, and his only son Martin had returned home from somewhere where he had been hiding for more years than I can remember to take over the reins of government. Martin and I had our own story. We grew up together. Well, sort of. We lived close to each other as kids, and growing up coincidentally, we went to the same college for a while and hung out in the same teenage hangouts. We even drank in the same pubs, went to the same dances, the same clubs, etc. But we've never been what you'd call buddies. Martin, as expected, being the son of a wealthy Jewish businessman, was educated mainly in the private sector, while I vegetated in the public system. Sometimes we even met the same birds in our youth, of course, at different times. So you can understand that we have always known each other, albeit very little. I always knew who he was, and he was well aware of my existence, although in fact we never hung out in the same company. At that time, I doubted that we had exchanged even half a dozen words with each other in our entire lives. But now Martin Goldman was the main cheese of the company I worked for, and his appearance at my humble door was completely unexpected. When Martin entered my small office, I wanted to stand up to demonstrate the obsequiousness that is expected when a big boss makes an unexpected visit to one of his insignificant subordinates. To my surprise, Martin motioned for me to stay where I was and sank into the seat opposite me. He took a quick glance at the cheap typist's chair on which he was sitting, and then looked around my domain with an expression of some contempt on his face, after which he leaned back in his chair and stared at me for a long time. For what seemed like an eternity, Martin Goldman didn't say a word, but just sat and looked at me. To be completely honest, I was afraid of what exactly this bastard was going to tell me. There were rumors around the company that Martin was making big changes at the top, and there were rumors that he seemed to enjoy personally conducting the necessary layoffs. At least he took responsibility for this case himself, and did not delegate it to one of the many brown noses, idioms, favorites, sycophants that he inherited from his old man after his return. "It's been a long time, Josh," Goldman finally said with a smile on his face, as if he was an old friend I ran into in the pub. I don't know why. I was very suspicious of this casual greeting, but I decided it would be diplomatic to follow his casual example. "Well, Mr. Goldman, some of us had to stay in town and keep the house fire going," I replied, trying my best to smile back at him. "For God's sake, Josh, stop all this formality. We've known each other long enough that you can call me Marty, at least when we're alone." "Thanks, Marty. But to be honest, we never—" "Don't talk nonsense to me, Josh. I still remember the night of the cup final, just before I went to Oxford. If you and your company hadn't supported us, these assholes would have gutted us." Martin was referring to an evening many years before that, which I had almost completely forgotten about. My friends and I went to the cup final at Wembley. On the way home quite by accident, we came across Marty and a couple of his friends, just as they were confronted by a small group of Neanderthal skinhead thugs masquerading as football fans. In any case, 3 Jewish boys in scarves of the wrong color were probably exactly what half a dozen jerks were looking for that evening. But 16 scantily clad and very noisy real football fans who confidently approached 3 Jewish guys. No. The skinheads made a strategic retreat, and then all 19 of us headed to the nearest pub to continue the celebration. After that, events became a little hazy for me. I can't remember almost anything that happened that evening, but I know for a fact that I woke up in my bed late Sunday night, safe and sound, but with a hangover beyond anything I've ever had, before or after. Where the sign, "Women's Locker Room," came from, a pair of women's panties with frills, or a yellow reflective jacket with the words, "Metropolitan Police" on the back, I have no idea. I threw the jacket away pretty quickly, and the sign is still hanging in my garage at home. And the panties? God only knows. That was the night. I've never been as drunk as I was that night, Marty said when I realized he was still talking. Yes, I kind of remember the hangover. Damn it, it's been going on for almost the whole week, I added when he stopped to catch his breath. It was my old man's wine. You sipped it like there was no tomorrow. They say you shouldn't mix grape and grain. Martin grinned. You know, he got mad at me. We almost emptied his wine cabinet and took all the cocktails out of the office. Were we at your house that night? I asked. It must have been a part of the evening that I completely missed. At my parents' house, the old man took some of you home in his car and sent the rest by taxi, don't you remember? I don't remember much about that evening, Martin. Well, at least not after your friends started ordering shorts, single portions of 25 or 35 milliliters, in the pub. My friends call me Marty, Josh. Yes, it was a damn good evening, but I'm not here to talk about old times, I am here to talk about you. Marty changed the subject, and I started to worry again. My spies tell me that you've been out of sorts lately and not as cheerful as usual. You don't feel bad or anything, do you? No, my health is fine. I don't know where you got that idea from, Marty. Come on, Josh. Betty has known you long enough to know that something is wrong. She told me that you've been very depressed for the last few months. What is it, money problems? You know that if I can help financially, I will help. Maybe we weren't bosom friends in the old days, but I am very much obliged to you. No, I've never had any problems with money. I've never had to complain about my salary. I hope not. The old man really appreciated what you and your friends did for me that night. You've been at the top of the salary rankings since the day you started working here. Suddenly I realized why I was trapped in this damn job. Although I had only spoken to the old man a couple of times during my time at the company, Marty's father probably recognized me or my name on the employee list and made it clear that I should be taken care of financially. In all the other jobs I've ever taken, I found that I earn more or at least as much as the top salary bar for a given position, even before I started working. I can't imagine what kind of expression I must have had on my face when I realized this fact. You didn't know that, did you? My father cared about the people who cared about him or his loved ones. But anyway, looking through your personnel file, I wanted to ask why you never tried to get promoted from this shitty department? Well, I am. What, Josh? Marty asked, but then his expression changed a little. Of course, you never thought about it. Damn it. You were thinking, weren't you? You thought the only way to get to the top of this company was to be Jewish or kiss the ass of the right people, didn't you? Damn it. You disappointed me, Josh. Marty was silent for a few moments and sat with a thoughtful expression on his face, but then the smile returned. Sorry, yes. I suppose from where you're sitting, it might seem that way. Almost all top brass are like that, if you think about it, so I guess it's only natural for you to think that way. But that's not the way I do business, Josh, and it's not the way I intend to run this company in the future. Actually, we've been thinking that you might want to take over as head of human resources. Excuse me? I replied. I must admit, I wasn't sure I got the gist of what Martin had just said right. HR department, Josh. Morris, the current HR manager, is retiring in a few months, and we thought we would like to replace him with someone who is not so narrow-minded. I've decided that you're the right person for this, but I don't know anything about the HR manager's job, Marty. So did fat asshole Morris, but that didn't stop him from not leaving this place for God knows how long. Look, Josh, things have changed in the last few years. You've noticed, of course, that the company lacks, ethnic minorities in the state. There are laws about such things nowadays, and eventually some jerk will stick a pistol in our face for it. Anyway, I thought you were the right person for us to deal with this situation. Why me? Well, I think it's obvious. That crowd you ran with when we were younger was nothing more than the League of Nations. There were probably representatives of all races and nationalities in the area, and I'm willing to bet that you're still in touch with most of them, aren't you? Well, yes, with those who still go to the band club to play snooker. You weren't the only one who spread his wings. Some of the guys are all over the country now. Anyway, the point is that no one can accuse you of prejudice, and that's the kind of person I need to run the HR department. I want to have a wide range of employees here, reflecting the local population. But, of course, you need someone who will do this job expertly. No, I need someone I can trust and who will do what I ask. I don't need people who are just typing numbers. I need people who will do their job well. Jetta, and I thought about it. Jetta? I repeated in surprise. Jet's name rang somewhere in the back of my head. It could not be called a common name, and our town is not that big. There was a girl named Jetta who frequented some of the dance clubs we both went to when we were young. The problem was that, and I do not know why, I realized from Marty's body language that the Jetta he was referring to was his wife. The girl I remembered was Indian. Marty chuckled. My wife and her stepsister Betty. In case you thought Betty and I were behaving badly after hours. I saw that you were puzzling over how it happened that I became so friendly with Betty. I didn't say anything in response to the remark about friendship because something else was bothering me. But Jetta, I began to say. And Jewish by birth, Josh, Martin said, anticipating the continuation of my comment. Then he continued. Historically, there is no large Jewish community in India, but it exists. It's very convenient. What my parents would have done with our relationship if she had been a Hindu, a Sikh, or someone else, I have no idea. Marty chuckled, and then explained that Jetta's mother died when she was little. They were living in East Africa when her father ran into Betty's recently widowed mother. I got the feeling that maybe he hired her as a babysitter for the kids or something like that. Although Betty's mother was Irish and Roman Catholic, they eventually got married and moved to live in the UK. The strange thing was that although I remembered seeing Jetta around town a lot when we were younger, I'd met her a couple of times myself. I could never remember seeing Betty often, if at all. But then again, Betty was a few years older than Jetta, Martin, or me, and she probably hung out with another group of peers. I suppose it also explained why Betty had been so friendly with Old Man Goldman over the years. At one time or another, there were rumors around the company that the old man was secretly using Betty. But that didn't explain why Betty and her husband were so often cozy with old Mr. Goldman's wife and Martin's sister at social gatherings. Marty said that he and Jetta met at Oxford and immediately found a common language. They got married before graduation, and after graduation they went to live in the States until Marty's father had a heart attack. We'd be at each other's throats if I went back to the company while he was here, Marty grinned. He kind of got stuck somewhere in the 50s. Look, we're off topic, Josh. It will be a few more months before Morris retires, but how do you like this job? Marty asked, getting us back on track. Am I rushing you with an answer, Marty? It's going to be a hell of a big change for me, and I'm not sure I can handle the job yet. I started to speak, but realized that Marty wasn't ready for me to say no. Of course you can do it, and I can understand that you might want to discuss this with Christina first. I commented, as if she cares. I don't like the way you said that, Josh. Do you have any problems at home that I'm not aware of? Is that why you've been out of sorts lately? Come on, Marty. Tina and I have been married for 14 years, and we have 3 children. What the hell does this have to do with the price of apples? Marty demanded. When children appear, Marty, relationships suffer a little. Are they suffering? I find it amazing. I would say that they only strengthened our relationship with Jetta. Yes, some things had to change, but now we are closer than ever. I wish Tina and I were like that, but in the last few years I have a feeling that we are just fulfilling our duties. And what does that mean? Well, Tina is more interested in children than in me. Jesus Christ. I'm sorry, Josh, this is one of Betty's blasphemies. Of course, you'll have to take a back seat for a few years. But that doesn't mean Tina doesn't love you as much as she always has or something like that. It's just how life works out. A few more years will pass, and the children will be gone, and Tina will still be by your side. Oh my God, Marty. I think it's not about Tina. It's about me. In the last couple of years, I think I've made a big mistake. What mistake? You didn't play on the side and corner yourself, did you? Listen, my friend, it's okay to have a little fun on the side. Not that I've ever succumbed to temptation, but it's stupid to go too deep. Hey, damn it. No, nothing like that. I just started thinking that I had married the wrong woman. I have no idea why I expressed my innermost concerns to Marty. To be honest, I hardly knew this guy, except that he was my boss and someone I didn't talk to. Well, I don't think I ever talked to him personally before, but he was the one who brought back memories of my youth. I'm sorry, Josh. I don't understand what your problem is. I'm not sure I understand either, Marty. It's like I have a 7-year itch or something. Lately, everything has been kind of messed up in my head. Marty put his elbows on my desk and rested his chin on his hands, clearly thinking. I don't know what to tell you, Josh, but maybe you should see a doctor or something. To a psychiatrist? You said that word, Josh, not me. Listen, I know a good man. He looked after my sister when she got divorced. He fixed her like a greasy lamp. If you feel as confused about your marriage as you say you do, it doesn't hurt to have a few words with him. What do you say? Maybe I should call this faggot? Marty asked, picking up the phone before I could answer. I don't know, Marty. I don't know if I should have told you that. I know. Listen, Josh, you were there for me once when I needed you. Now I and Jetta will be by your side, and Tina. Marty was pressing buttons on his phone even before he finished speaking. I sat in amazement while Marty called his sister and got the psychiatrist's number. I noted that he never told her why he needed this number. Then he called a psychiatrist whose name sounded foreign, Hebrew, and completely unpronounceable, or in other words, I don't intend to make a bigger fool of myself by trying to spell it. Marty asked me to go get a couple of cups of coffee while he was talking to this man. When I returned from the small kitchen of the department, I found that Betty had joined Marty in my office. But I knew perfectly well that they had stopped talking, and Betty turned to leave when I entered. "Betty, I want you to clear Josh's to-do list for today. He has the day off. Invite anyone who has any objections to contact me, okay?" Marty told her before she closed the door. "It's all set, Josh. I want you to go into town immediately, buy a good lunch at the company's expense, and be at the office of a good doctor at 3 o'clock sharp." "But Marty." "No buts, Josh. I want our HR manager to worry about our employees, not about himself and his marriage. Go to the city and see what a good doctor has to say about your problem. Personally, I think you're probably making a mountain out of a tiny mound. You're in a rut in this damn office, and you're making the mistake of taking your work with you." I wasn't at all sure that Martin understood my problem, but it seemed to me that he had a good motive, and I agreed to go to a meeting with the psychologist he wanted to see me with. After we had coffee, Marty walked me to the main entrance of the office. Perhaps to make sure that I really left the building, I left a large pile of work on my desk. As it turned out, I never saw this blood-sucking shrink, although I met him at a party a few months later. I was very surprised that it was only 11 o'clock when I took the train to the city. Why I got off the subway at Marble Arch and started walking along Oxford Street, the longest shopping street in the world, I have no idea. Perhaps I subconsciously wanted to pass the time. There were more than 3 hours left before the scheduled meeting. Anyway, I was probably halfway down the street, mindlessly looking into the shop windows and wondering if some bastard would try to take my wallet out, when I saw her coming out of the boutique. She was followed by a young sales assistant carrying several large bags. I recognized her immediately. Marion Holden looked almost exactly the same as the last time I saw her 17 years ago. The same long blonde hair and short dress showing off her slender legs. The same almost constant smile on his face. And she had the same effect on me as always. My heart skipped a couple of beats. I don't know exactly how long I stood there like a dummy while Marion waited at the curb, in the almost futile hope that an empty taxi would appear. But eventually it did. Marion opened the taxi door. And then, when she turned to take her purchases from the seller, out of the corner of her eye she noticed an idol standing there. She looked right at me for just a couple of seconds. Having lost her composure for almost the same amount of time, she suddenly screamed, "Joshua!" And at the same moment, an expression of recognition appeared on her face. She screamed my name so loudly that everyone within a few hundred yards turned to see who was being killed. Then, ignoring the bags the young woman was holding in her taxi, she crossed the 5 yards between us and stood in front of me, smiling. "It's you, isn't it, Joshua? God, it's been so long since we've seen each other. What are you doing in the city?" Finally, she asked, quickly changing the subject. "Hi, Marion. I didn't expect to run into you today." To be honest, it was hard for me to figure out what to say to her. What can you say to the great love of your life when you unexpectedly meet her after so many years? I'm not sure I can say exactly when Marion and I first met. Like Martin Goldman, she was always around when I was a kid. But as we got older, and puberty reared its ugly head, well, let's just say Marion developed quite unexpectedly and began to attract the attention of almost every young guy much earlier than most other local girls from our peer group. What made Marion tilt her hat in my direction for the first time? I have no idea. She was the most desirable girl in the neighborhood, but for a long time, I didn't even realize that she was interested in me. But by the time we were 15 or 16 years old, so I was told, it became obvious, practically, to everyone in the world except me. Okay, I admit, I caught myself too late. I was still into racing model cars and airplanes, or playing soccer when most of my buddies were enthusiastically or even cautiously dating girls. And I don't think their interest in the girls they were dating had anything to do with intelligent conversation. Anyway, Marion and I first met at a football match, or rather, after it. I had just scored my 3rd goal in the notorious hat trick and was receiving the usual enthusiastic congratulations from the rest of the team. Pats on the back and, quite painful, punches on the hands. We did not hug, as is customary with guys now. All of a sudden, Marion appeared on the field, put her arms around my neck and began to kiss me, as if it was going out of fashion. By that time, I was not as inexperienced in relationships with women as you might assume from what I said earlier. I dated a couple of girls, mostly to fit in with the rest of the guys and take away any thoughts that I might be sailing against the wind. Back then, everything was different, and any young guy with good looks who didn't date girls could end up under an inappropriate label. But standing on the football field that day, I suddenly realized what the point of this dating game was. It wasn't really love at first sight, but love or maybe lust from the first kiss. It was the first time that a kiss from any girl instantly attracted my attention, and to a greater extent than I want to explain here. It's pretty awkward when you're standing in the center of the field in thin football shorts and surrounded by spectators. That day after the match, I walked Marion home. Well, not really home. We kind of took a walk in the park, if you get the idea. I know we both got a slap in the ear from her old man because she was a few minutes late for curfew. This became a regular occurrence over the next few years, until we grew up and the old man stopped monitoring Marion's curfew. From that day on, Marion and I became, as it was commonly called, one company. The racing car models were left in the closet in my bedroom. Radio-controlled airplanes hung drearily from the ceiling of my bedroom. Even football has taken a backseat compared to Marion and being with her. The only sport that remained on the agenda was fishing, usually at night. And the reason Marion and I went there so often was because I had a little dome tent that I used to keep out the rain. Well, to be logical, we can assume that we did not go fishing, but this dome tent provided Marion and me with perhaps the best privacy that we have had for several years. Now, I'm not going to say that our relationship was all sweet and bright. Or maybe we couldn't keep our hands off each other when we were solving these stupid and inexplicably frequent disputes. The reason for which, to be honest, has completely disappeared from my memory over the years. Marion and I had been together for about 4 years when everything went to pieces. When I thought back, I couldn't remember exactly what that last fight was about. All I remember is that we were in a nightclub and Marion was dancing with her girlfriends, and I was propping up the bar with the guys. Maybe it was because I'd had too much to drink. Or maybe it's because I've had so much to drink that I can't remember exactly what happened. Anyway, Marion and I had a big fight about something late at night. For some reason, we blamed each other for the quarrel and insisted that the other should apologize. That was the end of it. I stayed at home for a few weeks and waited for Marion to call, and from that moment on I was told that she was doing the same thing. The problem, apparently, was that we were both too stubborn to back down. The weeks turned into months, and the more time passed, the more angry I got that she wasn't apologizing. I couldn't back down and apologize to Marion because, well, I had no idea what the hell we were arguing about at all. You understood how in the catch-22 question, a situation resulting from a logical paradox between mutually exclusive rules and procedures, I had to take into account the point that I could have been, and probably was, right. Oh, the logic of youth. Eventually, the gap between us became so big that we started dating other people. I don't know who started dating first, but one day a game started to make each other jealous. Someone had to be the winner. Since then, I've realized that none of us won anything. Oh, yes, after a year or so, you can say that I won Christina. It even seemed to me that I had been in love with her for many years. But lately in the last year or so I've been dreaming about Marion again. Me too. Do you have time for a coffee or something? What is it? She asked. Actually, Marion, I was looking for a place to have lunch before I went to the meeting scheduled for the afternoon. Lunch? Yes. It's a good idea. We could have lunch and tell each other about what we've been doing since we last saw each other. Where are you going to take me? You know, I ended up in Marion's taxi, heading to the Dorchester, before I really realized what was going on. No, we weren't going to have lunch there. Marion was obviously staying there and wanted to get rid of all the purchases that the young saleswoman was carrying with her. After leaving our morning purchases at the entrance to the Dorchester to a puzzled doorman, we went to a restaurant near the Victoria, where, according to Marion, they served the best steaks in London for lunch. Marion obviously remembered my penchant for good and very simply grilled steak. She even ordered for me with a smile and a wink when we sat down, although she left the choice of wine to me. You see, more time has passed since then than we would like to remember, but I still know what my Josh likes. She grinned as she ordered a medium, rare steak without any sauces. As far as I understand, only a fool destroys the taste of a good Aberdeen Angus steak by pouring it with some sauce invented by the chef. Marian ordered some kind of vegetarian dish for herself. Is Marian still a vegetarian? I asked. In public, Josh. I still like to chew a big sausage in private. I don't know exactly why I ignored the obvious hint in Marian's comment about sausages. Maybe I was too busy looking into those gorgeous green eyes and fighting back tears over what might have been to remember it properly. I saw the same longing tears appear again and again in the corners of Marian's eyes as we recalled in detail all the good times we had spent together over our meal. After the meal, we went to the restaurant bar. By that time, all thoughts of meeting with the doctor had been discarded. I had other things on my mind. Eventually, we got to the point where we remembered that night at the nightclub. None of us could remember why we had a fight back then, but both admitted, with wry smiles on their faces, that they were too stubborn to call each other and apologize. What made me pay attention to Marian's wedding ring then? I don't know for sure. I may have thought that a little more, and I will be sure that we will go to bed. So, how are you doing? Still married? I asked. It wouldn't hurt to find out the status of Marian's marital obligations, and it was quite gentlemanly of me to point out mine if she was interested. God knows, I've known too many guys who put women to bed without revealing the true state of things. If Marian had asked, I would have told her everything as honestly as possible. Well, just for now. The divorce will be final in about 3 weeks. It took a while because my last one was so selfish about finances. I hate it when things get unpleasant, don't you? I've never been divorced, Marian. And to be honest, I only know a couple of people who are divorced. Oh, this is my third. But William has been very stupid and selfish about my agreement. My God. His company is worth a couple billion, and he's arguing over the 2 million I wanted. Tight-fisted bastard. I commented somewhat ironically, but I don't think Marian got the joke. How long have you been married? For years, but we only lived together for about 18 months before I found out about his antics with some starlet actress. If I had been a little more patient, I could have gotten rid of him sooner. But when I found out about it, I had already made the mistake of sleeping with my personal trainer. I'm sure William put him up to it. Anyway, in the end I only get $800,000 in cash. And $40,000 a year in alimony, she added after thinking about it. It's not very athletic of him, is it? Teasing her again, I commented. It was hard for me to understand what Marian was telling me. I was sitting in a luxury restaurant with the first woman I fell in love with. Marian was the woman I still dreamed of. Her, the time we spent together, and the plans we made for our life together. It's lucky that you didn't have children with William. It would really be a cat among pigeons, although it might have brought you a few thousand more. I kind of joined in the conversation, just to say something. I have no idea how, but somehow I knew that there would be no children there, at least not from this marriage. Children, my God. No, I don't want them anymore. I had one child with my first husband. You won't believe what it did to my figure. I almost killed myself bringing her back. I think if I couldn't, I'd kill myself. My wife has never had any problems. You know, we have 3 of them, and now she's as fit as ever. I was surprised at myself. I suddenly and inexplicably felt proud of my Christina. Oh my God, horrible little creatures, Marian said, making a face. All those disgusting diapers that need to be changed, and the fact that you wake up at night. I couldn't stand it. I forced my first husband to hire a nanny, or rather, 2 nannies. One for the day, the other for the night. How old is your child now? Who was born to you, a boy or a girl? I asked. Oh my God, I do not know, 10, 12 or something like that. I haven't seen this little cow since I divorced her father. She was always whining about something, Marian replied with an expression of disdain on her face. Suddenly I felt like a complete fool. This was the woman I had secretly idolized all these years. And she turned out to be the most selfish and arrogant person I've ever met. What happened to that beautiful girl who was the first one I took to bed? I asked myself. And then it dawned on me. I didn't take her to bed. She seduced me that night. I was the best in my circle of friends, and she clung to me. Then the question came to mind again about why Marian and I broke up. The answer, long suppressed in my memory, was simple. I objected to her selfishness and constant flirting. Suddenly, I thought again about all our quarrels, and they could all be reduced to one of these 2 reasons. And if you think about it, the guys she was flirting with were either with money or they had more free money than me. I suddenly realized that I was nothing more than a stepping stone for Marion, the same as all her many husbands turned out to be. Oh my God. Look at the time I am late for an appointment, I said, hurriedly finishing my last glass. Look, Marion, please excuse me. I have to hurry, otherwise I'm going to pay like hell, I said before rushing to the bar and paying the bill. Do you really have to go? What is it? She asked, following me to the cash register. Yes, sorry, work. You know, I have a lot of responsibilities right now. Will you call me? I'm at the Dorchester for another week. Of course, Marion, we'll meet soon, when I have more time. I lied. I just wanted to get as far away from this woman as possible as soon as possible. I called Marion a taxi outside the restaurant, but I didn't get into it. He said that I would get to the meeting place faster by metro. She seemed to accept that excuse. Then I rushed as fast as I could to the nearest station. From a pay phone at the metro station, I called the doctor and apologized to his administrator for being late for the appointment. Would you like to try again? The woman asked. I don't think so. I believe that what happened to me this afternoon has cured my main problem. I just need to get home as soon as possible and hope that I can cure the other problem as well. I'm sorry, I don't understand, said the woman. Don't worry about it. I understand, and this is really important, I said before hanging up. I was in a hurry and very late, as I suspected, by several years. Unfortunately, by the time I bought the ticket, the Friday rush hour had started. Unfortunately, there was some kind of incident on the tracks, which further delayed my journey. As a result, I ran out of our local station only at 5:30. Tina used to put dinner on the table at 5:30. I stopped only to buy the largest box of Christina's favorite chocolates that I could find, a bottle of her favorite wine, a large bouquet of flowers, and some of the children's favorite sweets. Christina and I try not to let them eat too many sweets, but this evening was special. Then I ducked into a taxi, ignoring the shouts of waiting people for me to wait in line, and asked the driver to take me home, and urgently. He looked from the flowers to the wine, chocolate, and sweets, and then he looked at me. Big problems? He asked. Huge and deep, I replied. I was there. I bought a t-shirt. The taxi driver replied with a smile, and then pressed the pedal so hard into the metal that I fell hard into the seat. Pretty quickly, faster than usual, the taxi screeched to a stop at my front door. I just handed the guy a tenner and said thank you, getting out of the taxi. Good luck, kid, he shouted after me as I hurried away. I'm going to need it, I shouted back at him. I heard them in the kitchen when I entered the house through the front door. My car was still parked outside the office, so I assumed that if they didn't hear me drive up to the house, they wouldn't know about my arrival. Carefully and as quietly as possible, I put my burden on the table in the hallway and crept up to the kitchen door, which, by a lucky chance, turned out to be not completely closed. There I stood and listened to Christina gently, and with her usual good-natured humor, scolding the children for neglecting the table. Where's Dad tonight? My youngest asked. Why isn't he home yet? I don't know, honey. He's very busy at work, you know, Christina replied. He'll be here as soon as he can. But he's always late. It's like he doesn't want to eat with us anymore, my eldest chimed in. She hates not being the center of attention. I told you that Dad is very busy at work right now, and he has a lot of worries. But he loves you very much, you know, Christina replied somewhat unconvincingly. I thought it was time for me to show up. Taking a position in the center of the doorway, I gently pushed the door open. It took a few moments before any of the four realized that I was standing there. Oh my God, you made me jump, Christina said when she finally realized I was here. I wanted to surprise you. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to scare you like that, I replied. It was both stupid and a white lie, because that's exactly what I was going to do, even if I hadn't thought about it. Isn't that what most fathers do? Although most would probably shout, "Boo! Why are you so late, Dad?" My senior demanded. You missed dinner with us again. I'm sorry, honey, but I'm not really hungry. I had a pretty long lunch today, I replied. Did you go to a restaurant for lunch, Daddy? My eldest daughter insisted. Of course, baby. To a very posh restaurant in London. Who did you go with, Daddy? She wasn't going to give up until I told her everything, but I was going to do it anyway. I just wasn't going to tell the kids. I needed to explain everything to their mother. I went into the kitchen and stood so that I could look Christina straight in the face. I'm sorry, baby, that I was late for dinner, but I took a memory for lunch. I'm not sure I can explain the expression that appeared on Christina's face, but somehow I knew that she knew or suspected exactly what I was going to say. However, that didn't stop her from asking a question. And who was that memory? There was a hard and slightly worried note in Christina's voice. Marion Holden, I said. Oh, Christina commented in a clearly disappointed tone. Christina was well aware of my long-term relationship with Marion, as was almost everyone else who lived in the city and was around at the time. Yes, we met by chance and went to lunch together. How is she? As beautiful as ever? Christina asked. The children, sensing that something was in the air, fell silent. Even more than ever. It seemed to me that she was also into all the latest designer outfits. And what did you find an opportunity to talk about? Well, about everything. I learned a lot from her today. Something I should have always known, but for some reason I forgot. Christina turned and tilted her head to the side. You know how some people do when they listen carefully and try to understand what you're saying. What kind of things could you learn from her? Well, for starters, I was silent for a moment while I was doing fast mental arithmetic, which has never been one of my best subjects in school. The sixth happiest day of my life. The day I broke up with her. The sixth? Yes. My first is the day I met you. The second is the day I persuaded you to marry me. The third, fourth, and fifth are the days when you gave me the guests of our dinner. So this is the sixth happiest day of my life when I finally gave up on this fool. My God, it was a happy escape. I don't understand. Baby, I'm sorry. I haven't been able to calm down for a year or so, and like an idiot. I do not know. I began to think what could have happened if… Christina suddenly smiled. I know. You've got a habit of talking in your sleep. I started to say, but then I remembered that 6 little ears were sitting at the other end of the table, waiting. A lot? I asked. That's enough. Oh, B. It doesn't make sense. I am so sorry, but I guess that explains it. It was quite obvious to me what had happened, and a scenario was running through my head. How I would react if I heard Christina muttering some other guy's name in her sleep. Hopefully, it's about the same as she's been behaving to me lately. But knowing myself the way I knew myself, I suspected I would go crazy. But Christina kept talking. We can't control what we dream about, darling. Dreams are just random thoughts that your brain is trying to make sense of. Looking back on them now, baby, I don't think they were what you call dreams. I think it's better to call them nightmares. Suddenly, the smile on Christina's face turned into a smirk. Was she that bad? My God, it's worse than you can imagine. Selfish and, apparently, complete. I couldn't finish this sentence, not in front of the children. She's already got a third one, or the fourth, divorce. I never liked her. She was one of those girls. Well, you always thought she had an ulterior motive when she deigned to speak to you. And of course, she had you. Why would Marion dating me have any effect on whether you liked her or not? What do you think? Should I feel flattered? It depends on the circumstances. Christina got up from her seat and stepped into my arms. What are you two talking about? Suddenly interrupted mine, our eldest. About love, my sweet. Your dad and I love each other very much, Christina replied without the slightest hesitation. Oh, are you two going to be sentimental now? I don't think we've been sentimental enough lately, honey, I replied. And I think that's been the biggest problem here. But I think, or rather, I hope that I have solved this problem. How did you do that, Daddy? I took a memory to lunch, my dear, and I learned that sometimes memories are not what they seem. Life goes on.